Welcome to the Jury Thinks What podcast. Part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem, the Jury Thinks What podcast discusses everything there is to know about trying cases, from preparing the case before the lawsuit is filed, all the way to trial. And most importantly, how to understand what the jury is thinking. During our journey, we'll be talking to some of the brightest trial lawyers from many walks of life. What makes them successful? What makes them different? Do they have secrets to dealing with the jury? Let's find out. Here's your host of the Jury Thinks What podcast, Saul Gruber.
And welcome. This is Saul Gruber from Gruber Trial Consulting, and you're listening to the Jury Thinks What, a podcast by trial lawyers for trial lawyers on the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. And today we have a treat. As most of you who listen know, we have a lot of the trial guides authors come on to discuss at least portions of their book and what they're doing to help the rest of us learn our craft. And today we have one of my favorites. We have Sari. She's known as the Attorney Whisperer, and Sari has the book Hostage to Hero, which is just awesome. Not only that, but Sari has a podcast that I personally listen to on a weekly basis, and I always joke with her that she's like my therapist in the way that she tries to get our mindset the right way. Sari has so many ideas, so many thoughts, and she's a joy to listen to. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. You're probably going to want to take notes. And certainly if you have any questions, either contact Sari or myself. But I want you to enjoy this. Here she is, Sari Delamotte. Thank you. So we are here, and as promised, we have the Attorney Whisperer, as she calls herself, and my personal therapist that I listen to every time one of her podcasts drop, Sari Delamotte. Hi, Sari. How are you?
I'm good. Very good. Happy to be here. Finally, it took us some time to get this to put together, but yeah. So
when Sari, it seems like half of the clients that hire Gruber Trial Consulting already are involved with Sari's H2H method. And obviously I've read your book 3 times. I read it, I highlighted it, I read it again. And like a lot of the books that I get from trial guys, whether it's Keith Mitnick's book, your book, the older Ball on Damages book, it's just great to reread like before a big trial, especially if you highlighted it. But that's my key. So I don't reread all the other stuff. I reread the highlights.
I read all the trial guys' books and highlight them and use that stuff in my stuff, right? So it's great. There's such great information out there. It's so fun that Trial Guides is here in Portland. So
that's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Mm-hmm. So in one of the things that is unbelievable with Sari is she gets you to think, and she gets you to say, is that a good way? Is that a bad way? Not necessarily is that a winning way, but will that make me have fun? It's exactly what I look at it. And I'm very excited to have you on today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I want to get to some little stuff just because I feel bad if I don't. You know, we know that you're known as the Attorney Whisperer in our circles. How did you start doing this?
That is a long story,
but we want the short version.
Exactly. The basic gist is I was in grad school. I'm a classically trained pianist. You wouldn't know from my nails these days, but and I was on my way to get a doctorate. I wanted to teach at the university level, and she said, you need to go to this nonverbal communication training. And I was like, why? It was like a week long. And she says, it's going to make you a better teacher. And so I get there and I'm thinking it's all the body language stuff. You know, somebody crosses their arms, this is what this means. And it's none of that. It's all about how you show up and how you want to be as a presenter and a teacher. And I just ate it up. And so I go up to the guy, I'm like, how do I get trained in this? And he said, well, are you a school teacher? And I said, no, I'm in grad school right now. And he said, well, that's all we train is school teachers. And so I said, well, that's not good enough for me. So that night I went home and I looked on the website and I saw that he was going to be in Minnesota the following week and then in Florida. And so I came back the next day and I said, what happens if I just show up to these trainings? And he said, you can observe. So that's what I did on my own dime.
You started as a groupie. Oh, wow.
Well, this is Michael Grinder. So he was the brother of John Grinder, and Grinder and Bandler are the people who came up with NLP.
Oh.
And so he kind of fucking knows what he's talking about. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we not supposed to swear on your podcast?
No, it's fine. We're lawyers. We're trial lawyers.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
well, my website is sariswears.com. Should come with a warning. But that's what I did on my own dime. I was I was totally a broke college student, and I was putting it on credit cards, but I'd observe all day, and I'd take him to dinner, and I'd ask all my questions, and I pretty much trained myself. And that's what I started doing, is going into classrooms and helping teachers communicate better. And then 2009, the downturn kind of happened with the economy, and all of the extras in schools got cut. So then I went and hired a business coach and said, well, what do I do? And she goes, well, school rooms, boardrooms, let's adapt this for corporate. So that's what I did.
I know now I see their coaches everywhere. I mean, everybody I know has a life coach, a work coach, a this coach.
Mm-hmm.
Was it that way back in 2008 and 2009? I never had a coach.
I really I didn't either. I started not as a coach back then, as more of a trainer. So then I would go to like Nike, and I would, they would be like, how to deliver negative information without getting shot, quote unquote. And the Oregonians did a story on, me and nonverbal communication. And a lawyer called, and he said, will you come help me pick a jury on Monday morning? I knew nothing about anything. And so I said, okay. And I went down there, and he's expecting, because when you hear nonverbal communication, again, you think the body language stuff. So
absolutely, you do.
Yeah. I'm going to be watching the jury and being like, okay, they're bad and they're good, which I don't do at all. So he comes over on the break, and this is a criminal case. So we have like days of voir dire, which, when I got into the plaintiff world, which is primarily what I do now, it was like, and you have an hour and a half.
I was going to say, you have 40 minutes.
Right. And we're talking about 4 days. So he comes over to me at lunch, and he says, well, what do you think? And I said, about the jury? I don't know, but you have all sorts of problems. And he loved it. He was like, great, tell me. And so that's really kind of where it all started.
There really is nothing worse than getting up to make an opening statement in a case that you just don't believe in or don't like.
You shouldn't even do it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you shouldn't, but it's the nature of the beast. Everybody would love to just select the right case and only have the right cases, but a lot of times.
Well, there's a third option. Fall in love with your case. Don't get up there until you can find something in there to fight for and feel passionate about. Because people are always like, well, how do you get the jury to go your way? And I'm like, fall in love with your case. If you're not in love with it, how are they going to fall in love with it?
But that's really true, right? Because no matter what, if you're not in love with your case, if you don't believe in that client, I don't care what kind of actor you are. I mean, I'm a pretty effervescent kind. I mean, I'm an up guy, but I can tell you, and then what happened? You just want to shoot yourself in some of those cacases. And you're right.
It doesn't even have to be your client that you love, though. That's, I think, where we go wrong. We're like, well, if I don't like my client, then I'm fucked. No, like, what's the big picture? I remember talking to Rick Friedman when he lost the Da Vinci case with the robotic stuff and the surgeon. And there was a lot of money in that case, and he lost. And I emailed him. I said, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. And he said, that's okay. We'll get him next time. Now, who is he talking about? He's not talking about them. I mean, they got away. He's talking about the game that y'all are playing, the long game. So there's always something you can get behind, even if your client is the worst client ever and the case isn't that exciting. It's the larger game of justice that we all got to get excited about. Some clients will be better than others.
Absolutely. And we just did a podcast with Andrew Garza, and his office just got $100 million verdict in a horrifically tragic case. Just one of those cases that you just shake your head. And to watch him explain it was joy for me, because he every single thing about this case and this client he knew, he thought of. And he said the moment that they read the verdict, he and his client's eyes locked. I tell you, I was in tears. I mean, it was just it's just exactly what it's supposed to be, if we're lucky. But when I think of you, and maybe because I listen to you all the time, and I read your book a few times, I think of three things, right? I think of voir dire, opening and closing. And quite frankly, it's really voir dire and opening is what I really think about. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because the way you put them together and marry them that one is just an extension of the other is brilliant, and it's really exciting to listen to, and it's really exciting to work on.
Well, I think what you're talking about is what I call the trial dialogue. So I came up with that a long time ago, but what we know about social science and persuasion, and we don't tend to use persuasion very much in our work, meaning we don't call it that, because I think persuasion is something you do when somebody doesn't want to do the thing you want them to do.
Right.
And what we believe at H2H is that jurors want to do the right thing, and that bonus plaintiff attorneys stand on the side of the right. So all we need to do is get out of the way and motivate them to act, not persuade them. I mean, if I tried to persuade you that the sky is really blue, and I'm like, it is blue. If you go outside and you look, it's blue. You're going to start being like, wait a minute, is the sky really blue? Like, what the heck's going on here?
Exactly
because
right.
the truth is truth. You could just go outside and look. And it's, well, not here in Oregon. It's not often blue here in Oregon.
Well, I'm in Fort Lauderdale now, so it is blue here.
Exactly. So we know that people are motivated mostly by one person, and that person is them. So they believe themselves over everybody else. And so that's the premise where we started. It was like, okay, well, where do we get to hear about them and their
Right.
thoughts and feelings and beliefs? That's voir dire. So the trial dialogue is where we ask jurors in voir dire the questions, and we answer them in opening, but it's not really us answering. It's what we've gotten from voir dire. So if you listen to the podcast, the dram shop case that I always talk about,
Yeah.
where our opening rule we knew was going to be bars can prevent drunk driving, and the good ones do. So what we did in voir dire was ask, can bars prevent drunk driving? Now, of course, that wasn't our first question. We led them there. But by the time we got there, the jurors were like, oh, yeah, hell, they can. And we were like, how? And that's the other premise of H2H is the jury, we let them solve all our problems. And they said, well, they can do this and they can do that. And by the time we got to opening and we said, bars can prevent drunk driving, the jurors were nodding like, yep, I said that. Yep. And so we made them smart. So we're really sourcing our opening in voir dire. We know what's coming. It's not like, I remember when I was writing the book and my editor was like, what do you mean? Like, you don't write your opening until after voir dire? I said, no. We know what we're going to say in opening. So because we know that, we then design questions to get the jurors to say it first. And when they say it first, then it's just everything. The way is clear in opening, because now we're just telling jurors stuff they've already heard out of their own mouths.
And see, being born and bred, well, I'm from Philadelphia, but my entire professional life is in New Jersey. And until in the last 6, maybe 8 months, we weren't able to ask any questions, right? It was all judge driven. And because you've worked there, and it's only in the last 10 years we were able to ask a whopping 3 open-ended questions.
Wow.
3, that's right, 3. But if the judge had to like it, and more often than not, the judge said, no, you're just trying to taint the jury by this question. And I would always think to myself, well, everything I say, I'm trying to taint the jury. I mean, that's my job, is to get the jury to agree with me. So every word that comes out of my mouth, I think by definition is to get the jury to agree with me. But they would let us ask questions, or rather they would let the jury ask questions at the end of each witness. And I made a practice, and not everything would have to be handed into the judge, and then we would talk about it, and then the judge would be a ruling whether it can be asked. Well, every question that the judge wouldn't ask, somehow I worked into the next witness's questions. Because there was always an objection. He's trying to curry favor with juror number 5. And I would think to myself, absolutely I am. I think, isn't that what we're doing here?
But see, that's what I don't think you're doing. And I think this is where, people are so drawn to H2H, is because I think the premise that y'all are under, or the understanding is, I got to go in there and I've got to convince these jurors to believe my version of events. And everything we know, and I'm so big, as you know, from listening to the podcast on brain science and all the ways the brain works, is that you can't do that. Not easily, and not in the amount of time that most of you are given, is to convince anybody of anything.
Right.
But what's even more important is that you don't need to. We know that if we just find what worldview our case and how it fits into the juror's worldview, that they will naturally own it and want to do what you want them to do. But so many plaintiff trial attorneys get in their own way of like, I got to I've got to persuade, I've got to convince, I've got to be charismatic, I've got to be like Nick Rowley. No, I got to be like Roger Dodd. No, I got to be, and it's just like, stop. Just, you don't need to be any of that. You just got to find out how to make your case, not about your client, but about the jury. And when you make it about them, they are going to own it, because we all love ourselves and talking about ourselves and making ourselves safe, which, the reptile is really big about.
I mean, we're all big with that, right? I mean, it's, and if you're going to be a trial lawyer, you already have this huge ego. And we just do. We can't help ourselves. And then to make it not about us at all, and it have to be about either the client or the jury. I mean, you think you're going to walk away unsatisfied, but you're really not. I mean, you're really walking away feeling phenomenal when you make it about the jury. So,
but here's the thing I'll say about ego, because I love that, is that y'all appear to have big ego. And what I'm finding, because it's so funny, when we hired our marketing team, who we love, and we did the whole rebrand and sariswears.com and all of that. They went, and of course, one of the first things they did was they went and looked at who our avatar is, who's our main client. And guess what? It's a male between the ages of 40 and 60, or it's 45, 65, white, right? That was our primary. And everybody was like, oh my God, can't we have something just for the women and the people of color? But love it or leave it, those are my people, and we call them Joe, and I love all of my Joes. And so what I have found out about Joe is that Joe's scared. And that's what the ego is about, is the puffing up and I got to get the 8 or 9 figure verdict to prove that I'm awesome. And what we always say is, you're bigger than the size of your verdict. There is a dick in verdict. And because that's how that's all it is a verdict measuring contest, right? And so that's where the big ego comes from. It's a shield to say, I'm not scared, when all y'all are scared, and there's nothing wrong with being scared, because this is a very scary, risky business, being a trial lawyer.
The fear of trial is severe, serious, and it is real. And if somebody tells you it's not, they're more scared than anybody. I mean, that feeling the 2 weeks before trial, when there's a reason I'm divorced twice. But that feeling, the 2 weeks before trial, when you don't even know what else is happening in the world, nor do you care. And then the offers start coming in, and now you're talking to the client, and now you have to make an opening statement. You've just turned down $2.5 million. You have no cash flow. Your sphincter is permanently puckered right now.
Absolutely.
It is some of the most frightening stuff that I've ever been through. Until you open your mouth. Here's
the big thing about that, though, is you think you're the only one. You think that everybody else has it figured out. This is what I know about Joe. Everybody else is the big cojones, and they're just walking around and they have no fear. And what we have found in creating this H2H community is that people are surprised. They're like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. I'm like, no, everybody feels the way that you feel. And it's normal. And there's a safety in that, of recognizing, oh, I can let go of that ego, and I can really get down to brass tacks and stop trying to manage things and start trusting my jury and start letting them do some things. I have a podcast coming out about the fact that y'all talk too much. And part of that is because you're not okay with silence. And the reason you're not okay with silence is because you think it means something. It means that they don't like me. It means that they think I don't know what I'm talking about. Where silence and being in silence and not having that be awkward is a sign of leadership. That you can breathe fine when things are weird and handle shit. And that's really one of your greatest assets, is to allow that silence to be there.
Too much. Too much. But I will tell you, that silence, certainly when you're in discovery, taking depositions, I love silence, because the witness just keeps filling that silence, and it's fun.
And so will the juror. That's what I said. They go, well, it's so awkward. I go, let it be awkward. When it's awkward, someone's going to come in and rescue you. I mean, there's a great study with American Express where they would call people who were late on their bills, and they'd say, hey, you're late on your bill and you need to pay. And the person's like, what? I paid that. And so they changed it. And this is what they did. They called and they said, hi, this is American Express calling. Silence. And then the person on the other end go, I know I'm late on my bill, aren't I? right? Because there is this impetus to fill that silence. And what I'm suggesting is the lawyer shouldn't be the one filling it.
You said something a few minutes ago that I wanted to circle back to. You compared, I think you said the jury's reality and our case's reality or our reality. And tell me more about what you're talking about there.
Well, I've seen a shift. Rick Friedman, who's a good friend of mine, that's why I mention him all the time because I learned so much from Rick. But he talks about,
as we all do. We all do.
Right. I mean, but I've just had such a unique opportunity to just have his ear for so many years. He was really my first mentor. And he says, we used to look at the plaintiff, they're broken in the wheelchair and in trial and say, there, but by the grace of God go I. I mean, that could have been me,
right,
that was hit by the whatever. Now we look at the defendant and we say, there, but by the grace of God go I. I don't want to be the person who sued. This country's out of control. Too many lawsuits. And so I think due to that, there's been this big shift, which I think is a great shift, to not tell it from the plaintiff's point of view in terms of the story, to focus on defendant's conduct. Keenan and Ball had a lot to do with that, along with Rick. And what I'm doing is continuing that shift. And I'm saying, okay, let's still take it off not take it off the defendant. We of course want to focus on there, but what we want to do when we're shaping our case and our themes is make that about the jury, because everybody listens to WIFM. What's in it for me?
Absolutely.
And if they don't think it has anything to do with that, I mean, just simple things like starting your voir dire and saying, who here is a parent? Immediately, whoever's not a parent, they're like, this is about me, bye, and they tune out, right? So you need to have something that gets everybody on the same page. Like one of my favorite responsibility questions is, who here has ever had parents? And everybody laughs. But now we're suddenly okay, so what did your parent do when you broke something or hurt somebody, right? And then we immediately go into that. But that's the issue, is that we've got to get everybody involved. And the number one way to get, and this isn't rocket science, is to make it about them. To make it about them.
I mean,
and all of our cases are about jurors, are they not? That's what plaintiff lawyers do. They make the world a better place, the world that jurors live in. So all of y'all's cases are about jurors. The end. I
don't know if you know Carl Bettinger.
Not personally, but love his book, of course.
Yeah, I was about to say, Carl was a good friend of mine because we were all nursing home lawyers together. And when he came out with 12 Heroes, at first I'm like, come on, Carl. Nobody can do anything like it. And if you knew Carl, well, not that he's passed. I mean, he just doesn't practice anymore. But if you knew Carl, he's a doctor. He's very soft spoken, very trial lawyers college-y, very vulnerable, and
isn't that funny how we know exactly what that means?
Yes.
He said it.
It's true, though.
Very TLC-ish.
Yeah, and I've never done TLC because I have in my head that I'm not the kind of person who could espouse vulnerability in a believable way.
You mean stand up on the table and do a poem or whatever weird shit they have you doing? It's no judgment.
Listen, they're great lawyers. It's not me. Yeah, it's just not me.
Right.
But it's Carl. And Carl would show us that in one of his $54 million verdicts against Manor Care, he literally, throughout the trial, kept pointing to where the lady who was raped was. The room was in the center of the courtroom, and he would always stop and not make sure he wouldn't walk into it. And then the defense attorneys would trample right through it, and he would say you would see the faces of the jurors are like, oh my God,
they wince.
Yes,
they wince. Mm-hmm.
And I read Carl's book the first time, and I thought, some more of this bullshit. All these snake oil salesmen, and then I started to try some things to a lesser extent that Carl talked about with the jury, which you really amplify phenomenally. And damn, it makes perfect sense. It really does.
Well, I had somebody email me the other day. I don't know them. They're not in the H2H crew. And he said, I read your book and listened to your podcast. I have to tell you, I had this case, $90,000 offer. We're going to trial. I'm doing closing. I find out as the jury is coming in that I'm on voir dire. Now, how that didn't get communicated, I have no idea. But he said, sorry, I got to tell you, it was the best voir dire that I have ever done in my life. And it's because of your teaching. He said, I had nothing to hold on to. So all I could do is connect with the jury. That's literally all I could do. And doing that, come to find out, made all the difference in the world. $6 million verdict on a $90,000 offer. And it's so true. I hear that all the time. People saying, I got thrown in voir dire at the last minute. And it was the best voir dire. Now, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't prepare for voir dire. We do a lot of preparation. I think both can be done. But what I am saying is that when people are forced to just connect, because that's all they have, they then recognize the power in it.
I do it at every focus group. Right? The beginning of every focus group, I spend 15, 20 minutes talking to people and just how else am I going to get them to say, to be honest? I mean, I have to.
You got to create that safety and get them all. Yeah,
and it definitely does work. And I'll tell you, I want to talk about voir dire with you for a little bit because the funnels.
My favorite subject.
I'm just, it fascinated me. Jay Vaughn, and I am very good friends with Jay, and we were, I think, in Nashville.
The Ginger Wolverine.
Yes. Back 5 years ago, I had a scotch made for him that does their own labels, and it was the ginger.
I bet he loved that.
Oh yes, he did. They did, and I can tell you this now. I just had a picture made for his bourbon room. I literally just ordered it today. It'll be sent to him. He'll have it before this even drops.
Great. I was like, you just let out the secret. Okay.
No, it's okay. So and I talked to Jay about, and he's been a guest on our show as well twice. And I talked to Jay about the $94 million verdict he had with John, with his partner, with Ron rather, and he attributes his portion completely to H2H, his voir dire. So I was in another case in Kentucky as a consultant, and I said, "Take me through it, Jay. Let's talk about it. Take me through it." And as trial nerds, I mean, we're all into that, right? We're just it's fun. And I said, okay, that makes sense. And I tried to replicate some of the things Jay was telling me for a case in Kentucky as well, which just settled. And it was turning out to be awesome. It ended up settling before we actually do it, but it just made sense to me. Tell us about how you go about. I know what the funnels are, but you tell us about it.
Yeah. And if anybody, there's like a whole free video. If you're like, I want to know more and I want to see, sorry, write this on a flip chart at sarisuarez.com/training, I believe is the URL.
Okay. But we'll put it in the links.
So it's free and it's 16 minutes all on what I'm about to talk about right now. I'm probably not going to talk about it for 16 minutes right here, but the basic gist is that we can and that's what the name of the training is. We can let the jury solve our problems. How? We're gonna create or base our trial, our case on principles. Now, principles are fundamental truth. So what we do to do that is we start with our fears. So what's everything wrong in our case? And y'all can just come up with lists and lists of that. So all the issues that are on the defense points, the things we're scared of, all the things, our client isn't likable. And then we create what we call an ideal juror profile. And the way you do that is you take a fear off your list and you just ask yourself one question. What would a juror have to believe for this to no longer be a fear? Like if this flew out of their mouth, I would be like, ooh, I like this juror, right? Like, let's design the perfect juror.
Wow.
And we come up with all these beliefs because here's where I think a lot of voir dires go wrong is y'all are asking about experiences. Who here's been in a hospital? Who here's been in a car crash?
Right.
And then you call on people and they tell you about their experiences. And then you hire someone like me, which you can't do anymore because of what I'm about to tell you. And you come over to me and you go, what do you think? And I go, I don't know. I know that a lot of people have been in the hospital and have been in a car crash. What the fuck does that tell me? It tells me nothing, right? I don't care about a juror's experience. Sorry, jurors. I mean, you all very interesting. What I do care about is how that experience created a belief or some type of meaning in their lives. And so we in the H2H method just use the experience as a jumping off point to get down what we call the funnel. So once we have all these the ideal juror and who we're looking for, because in our method, we don't do exclusionary voir dire. We go in looking for our people. Now, will we find the people that are not our people? Yeah. And we'll kick them off and we'll do all those good things. But we're coming in through the other door. Instead of who here is not my people, we come in through who are my people. And then we get rid of whoever's left. Okay. Now, to know who our people are, I got to know what they believe. Like, I got to design my juror and then see who shows up on this list of beliefs. Notice it's not demographics or age or any of that stuff. So once I have all that and I know who I'm looking for, then I come up with my principles. Here are the things I want jurors to give to me. And then I design a line of questioning to get them to say it. It's not forcing them to say it. It's something I already know my person believes.
So example, let's talk about that. Oh, good. You're about to give me an example. Perfect.
I was saying, yeah. So for example, let's say that in my case, is about I'm thinking of Eric Penn's, 94. You just said 94. I think it was something around that though, in his trucking case.
Right.
And so the first funnel I might want jurors to tell me is that trucking, semi-trucks or 18-wheelers, where you may be, can cause enormous damage, right? I don't want to say that and then go, who here agrees? I want jurors to tell me that.
Okay.
So I might start with who here, there's my experiential question at the top of the funnel. Who here has ever shared the road with a semi-truck? And everybody's going to raise their hand, right? So that clears the bar of including everybody. And where I normally wouldn't want to ask about everybody's experience, for example, if I said, who here has ever been hospitalized or knows someone who has, I don't want to go and ask everybody about their experiences.
Right.
Nobody gives a fuck about that. It's gonna fracture the group. They're gonna be like, who cares about your knee surgery, right? So, but here I do want to. Why? Because it's gonna get the danger in the air. What was that like? What was that like? Oh, it's scary. Why is it scary? Tell me more. So I'm getting all that danger in there. Then I'm gonna go to, okay, so what would you expect in terms of training? So now I'm at my expectations question. Well, I would expect they were trained. What's important about that? Well, because these are bigger trucks and there's people on the road, And then I'd say, well, what could happen if they aren't trained? And they'd say, well, you could cause a crash. And I'd say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, they're enormous. They can cause enormous damage. Boom. There's my principle. I never had to say it. I never had to say it. And it's not like I'm making them say it. I know that they believe that, but I know that if they say it and I don't say it, so much more powerful.
Now,
so that's basically what a funnel is.
So you have to start out though in making that full group be comfortable to talk, right? Because then you want everybody to talk amongst themselves about danger that's in the air. How do you get to the point? How do you recommend we get to the point before you get to the funnel questions to give everybody that comfort level that it's okay to talk? And sometimes it's okay to disagree.
Well, you just totally set me up, and I know you're doing there, my friend, for the Designed Alliance, which is a huge part of the H2H method. So Saul, you're absolutely correct, is that we can't just run right in and start asking questions. So what we do is what we call designing. It's actually a coaching term, which I am, by the way, now a coach, going back to your earlier question, certified as a coach. But it's how do we want to be in this process? Anytime I bring a client in, I say, what do you think coaching is? And what do you want this to be? And how do you want me to hold you accountable? And like, we're designing. So I thought to myself, when I was going through coaches training, shouldn't we be doing the same thing with jurors? So that's what we do now. So we have them come in and we say, who here's ever been through jury selection before or seen it on TV? So now I've got everybody, right? And they all raise their hand. I go, what do you think happens? And they say, you're going to ask us questions. And I'll say, and why do you think we ask you questions? And they go, so you can figure out who's good or bad. And I said, and then if you're good for me, what happens? And they go, we have to stay. And I go, yep, that's normally how it goes, isn't it? Right? I don't want to do it that way. I think you should have some say. Now, the minute I say that, jurors are like, what? I have some say. Now they're listening to me. Right. And I said, yeah, now I don't have all the say. But what I'd like to design with you is that we talk about some of the stuff that this trial is going to have. And then at the end of that conversation, you tell me if you want to be here. Who's willing to have that conversation? And everybody hand goes up. Oh, yeah. If I can get out of this, I'll talk to you. And then I say, okay, 2 caveats. First caveat, we can't talk about evidence. So there's going to be some things that you're going to be like, well, what about this? I won't be able to answer that. Now, that's important for me to do ahead of time because oftentimes we'll get into a voir dire and a juror will go, they'll be having such a great time. And they'll go, yeah, but what about this? And then the attorney will go, can't talk about that. And then the juror feels stupid. So I want to design that ahead of time, right? There's going to be some things I won't be able to tell you. Second caveat, if at the end of this, you go, I don't want to be here. I don't have total control. There's a judge, there's another side. They get to make some decisions, but I'll do what I can do to see that you can go home. Can't guarantee it. Now, when I talk about the design, everybody's like, a judge would never let, and I'm like, have you tried it? And they're like, no. And I'm like, go try it. And they'll come back and they'll be like, damn, I totally got away with that. I'm like, yeah, because you're not doing anything improper. All you're saying is, I want to know your preference. And with that preference, I will do my part, but I don't have total control.
It's funny that you just said that, because as someone who started doing nursing home work in the early 90s, we kind of had to develop things, right? It wasn't like it is now where everything's, in a piece of paper, the whole plan. And everybody would say to us, well, we can't do that in our jurisdiction. And I could still remember
about
speaking
anything.
About anything. I could still remember speaking for Virginia trial lawyers about corporate designees, and a lawyer said, they won't let us do this here. I said, well, how do you know? Is there case law?
That's right.
And he said, no. I said, well, then you have to do it. And if they don't let you, and it's a case worthwhile, you take it up, and you show that there's no law against it. And in fact, it's supported by the law. And guess what? It's gonna be okay. And we kept pushing that. And then, Mark Kozorowski was able to write a whole book about it, about all 50 states and what they do. And that's because everybody was pushing all the lawyers to just do it and see what happens. It's the same thing.
Well, and that's the same thing with voir dire. Well, we don't have voir dire in our state, or we have limited voir dire. And my answer to that is always, well, what the fuck are you doing about that?
Yeah, well, man.
Like, get on that issue. Like, start pushing that. Somebody's got to go first. I mean, proper justice doesn't happen. This is the thing, is we don't, as plaintiff attorneys, we don't have to play by defense's rule. They don't get to make the rules and say what is and isn't proper. And they're in there arguing their side. Why aren't we arguing ours? So again, it's that culture of fear, because plaintiff attorneys start behind the line, right? Just coming into trial, you're already looked at as this shark, this liar, all the things from the media has told us. And then all the restrictions, and it's unfair. I mean, like Rick Friedman says, it's like being a firefighter and then complaining about the smoke, right? That's part of the job. It is unfair. That is exactly why you are needed. It is not so that you get scared and tuck and run, right? You got to get in there and
that push. Fear, though, that fear is palpable. It really is. I mean, you just got to walk right through it.
This is why mindset training is such a huge part of H2H. I mean, it is like we have 3 cornerstones: create compelling content, command the courtroom, claim your freedom. So there's this huge part of my work, and this because you listen to the podcast, which is mindset related. Because all the things I can tell you, go do this, go do that, try this, do the Designed Alliance. If you're scared, none of that's going to matter. You got to get your mind right first.
I've told you this before, Sari. You are my therapist. My actual therapist would be very upset to hear me say that, but I think she would get over pretty quickly. Your podcast is, for me, very therapeutic. And I'm not even trying cases anymore, and it's very therapeutic. So you get them feeling comfortable, and now you do the funnels. How many funnels do you really try to do, though, in a voir dire?
It depends, but for me, I would say there's a lot that can happen in a funnel. And we talk about it being 3 questions, right?
Right.
That's the structure of it. That's the scaffolding, but there's also conversations happening in there and kind of cool things. So in general, I would say 4 to 6 funnel, like conversational areas. You don't need more than that. Right. You just don't need more than that. And I have a podcast coming out talking about how important sequencing is. Because you can have great funnels, but if you put them out of order, then we're in trouble. Because what we have to understand about the brain is that the brain wants to make connections and weave a narrative, and jurors are the one people in the room that have no idea what the fuck's going on. They have no idea what the case is about. They have no idea about anything. So even in the questions that you ask, they're going to be weaving this narrative, like, oh, this is what this case, oh, then this happened, right? And so if you don't put that in the right order, you will have a different narrative than you want being weaved in their brain. And so sequencing is really important in the method too, that your funnels go in order. In general, we talk about, you want to have like your danger funnel, like front load the danger is what we always talk about, like talk about the danger, in other words, get them to tell you what the danger is. How can that danger be avoided? And then what can we do to fix it, since they didn't avoid it, which is why we're here.
I think sequencing is everything. In your opening, in your story, you change, and that's why we always do 2 focus groups in a day. So we can change the sequence in the afternoon focus than we did in the morning, just to see.
We do 2 mock juries a day. Same thing.
Because if you don't, just a simple change.
That's right.
Means everything. If a juror is looking at this through the lens of, oh, that's dangerous if that happens, and then they hear that happens. That's unbelievable. You've just hit you've done exactly what you want to do.
Well, that's like what we were talking about before we started recording about the should we put the teaching section or educate the jury section before or after the defendant's story? And for me, it's always before. Right. Why? Because for me, I want to talk about what should happen, and then I want to talk about what did happen. So I want to say heart surgeons need to do 3 things in order for people not to die. I mean, it'd be much better said, right? 1, and this, 2, this, 3. Now let me tell you what happened here. So as I'm telling the story, I say, and so then he didn't do this thing. And the jurors are like, shit. She just said they're supposed to.
Right.
And then the story continues. And then he didn't do this thing. And they're like, oh my God. Of course, I'm telling a story. I'm not saying, and he didn't do this thing.
That's what I was about to say.
In my story.
Good. I feel better.
Yeah. No, I'm actually storytelling. But they're in their brain is going, wait a minute. She said he's supposed to do that thing. And
if you do it the right way, as you're telling the story, it's becoming more suspenseful. And in their mind, they're saying, well, if they don't do this, something bad's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen. Yeah.
See, I always say that people cannot judge conduct without context. So the issue that I have with David Ball's template, for example, which in many cases doesn't even have educate the jury section, but putting it later, is that when we tell the story first, jurors are like, was that wrong? Were they supposed to do that?
And I don't know. I will tell you, my experience has been, and we've talked about this because I told you I'm lucky. Sari and I are lucky enough to share a number of clients who I have this discussion with and have had it over the last couple of weeks. And my position is, it's not even a position. Well, my thought is exactly like yours, except if you have the right rules, invariably, and I'm a big believer of the rules of 3 and recency and privacy.
Me too. Yeah.
But if you have 3 really good, solid rules that everybody agrees with, they're not legal, they're just common sense rules. They're in essence the educating the jury. So when things don't,
I was gonna say we're saying the same thing.
I think we are. I actually think we are.
Yeah, because for me, there's a hook, some big overreaching rule. And then our teaching section is almost always 3 rules. And we always say this is important because, right? So we tell them why we have the rule, which is very similar to a lot of the reptile and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we go into the story. Because exactly right, because they need to be like, oh, so here's what should happen. Then we show them what did happen.
Exactly.
So I always talk about show and tell. We reverse it. We tell them what should happen. We show them what did. Then by the end, they can go, well, that's bullshit, without us even having to say anything. They're like, what? Why didn't they do these very simple things that you say are important?
So now we're there. I'm not going to really talk too much about rules. That's a whole nother podcast. But what I'm faced with a lot of different clients now is they're having just horrible time coming up with the rules because everything's legal to them, right? Everything is the law. And then they want to tell a defense story that the story itself takes 45 minutes. And they want to put every fact that they're possibly in because it could be important.
Oh my God.
What do you say to them?
Well, you know what I say, but you want me to say it out loud. So what I say is 30 minutes tops for your opening. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, you're not one of them. If you're listening to this, you'll know if you're one of them, and you're most likely not one of them. Here's why. If I say you have all the time in the world for your opening, you're going to put, just like you said, every last thing just in case. If I said you have 5 minutes, you have 2 minutes. I do this with my VIP clients. I said 2-minute opening, go.
Yeah.
It becomes real clear, real quick, what is important. Not to mention, there's 2 benefits. One is that we want the jury remembering your opening. Opening is the only time that you get to hum the tune that you want to be in jurors' heads all throughout trial. Because think about trial. Trial is one big clusterfuck. It's a bunch of people telling your story out of order, incorrectly. There's no coherent anything. So opening is the only time that you can go, here's the tune, here's the tune. You're going to hear it badly sung in a minute, but here's the tune. Now, is big Wagner opera going to fit the bill? No. But what about It's a Small World from Disney, right? That's easy. It's catchy. I can remember it. That's one benefit. Second benefit is you can remember it. None of my clients do openings with notes. Not a single one of them. Why? Because they know their opening so well, they could do it backwards, forwards in their sleep because it's short and it's punchy. And also notice, because you often most of the time get to go first, you have this punchy, no, you don't get to go. Yes, you do.
Yes,
You have
you
this
do.
punchy opening, and then they come in with their 3-hour monologue. The jurors are like, who's more confident?
There's no
Who's more?
question.
This guy knows his case. If it's going to take me 2 hours and 300 PowerPoints to describe to you what happened, this case is so complex. I need all of this. The jurors just give up. They go, well, if it's that complex,
Exactly.
then I can't do it. Not to mention that your big job is to motivate them to do something. The easiest thing is to do nothing at all, is to leave things as they are.
Yeah, the first question that they have, I mean, if it's that complicated, you can almost guarantee that when they go back and answer the questions, the jury questionnaire, the first question, the answer is going to be no. And so
that's exactly right.
They don't have to answer anything else.
Nonetheless.
Yeah.
That's why I talk so much about flip charts. I'm like, it should be easy to like just draw on a flip chart what the hell you're talking about. 3 words, your 3 rules or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that you should never use PowerPoints or boards, but one of my clients said, well, sorry, I just tried this whole case, the whole thing on flip charts. I'm like, John, you didn't need to do the whole thing on flip charts. He's like, no. It was great because the other side came in with 14 lawyers of oil case down in Texas. And he said, here was me and a flip chart. I said, what happened? He said, some guy was leaving his job, fell asleep at the wheel and ran into somebody else. So there's not even intent, right? This guy killed this other guy because he was tired.
Wow.
And he said, I tried the case with the guy who was killed and on a flip chart. And I asked my attorneys, I always go, how much do you think he asked for or he got? 50,000, 100,000. I said, how about $120 million? And they're like, and they go, how do you get that? I said, because he asked for it, because he believed in it.
Yeah. I mean, remember,
there's no book that says this is what you get in wrongful death, and this is what you get. It's whatever you can own, baby.
Well, I hear that. So, but don't you think jurors have the expectation that you're going to use more than a flip chart? I mean, in today's CSI, and I'm not saying there has to be all these words. I think text is a nightmare and is your enemy in opening statements.
Of course they do. That's why flip charts are so great, right? Because they expect all the shit, and then somebody comes in there and just draws it. That's ballsy. That's like, this is so simple. I can just draw it for you. Now, if you need a picture of a spine, I don't want you drawing that shit. If you need to show the intersection, don't, there's stuff that has to be shown.
Sure.
Absolutely. Like I said, but like when you're just talking about rules, I love using flip charts and voir dire. So I asked the jurors, how can bars prevent drunk driving? And they'll say, well, they can not overserve. I'll go to my flip chart, overserve, not overserve. Yeah. Jurors love that. They're like, ooh. And then I keep that up in opening if I can get away with it. Rick can. So I think you can in several jurisdictions. So it's very teachery. It also gives that vibe of we're in school, we're learning, and it's very
so fascinating because when we do the focus groups, we do the same exact thing. I'm a big list maker. I say, well, let's talk about how could this have been stopped? Or at what point do you think that this would have been stopped? And I end up, I have my iPad. It's normally either on a projector or a TV. And I just, because my handwriting, Philadelphia public schools weren't very good for handwriting back in the 70s.
All y'all is about your handwriting. You know, my answer to that is learn to write better. Don't use that as an excuse, but go on.
And we will type it or write it on a whiteboard that then gets projected. I don't know why but by the same token, if you use an easel at trial and you're writing things down, that could go back to the jury. Whereas typing can't.
Rick Friedman's propofol case, $104 million verdict. I was there for jury selection, but over the trial, he had Lee, who's his trusty sidekick there, and he would on cross-exam, he would have, get the rules from the opposite side.
Right.
So if the company has a safer option, they should choose that one, right? And the guy's just sputtering. But eventually he says, yeah. So here Lee types, if there is a safer option, company should choose that one. Comes up. That went back with the jury in the verdict room. So I love writing things down, especially if I'm taking jurors' words, because that's, again, much more persuasive or motivating when they see their own words.
One of the things that I stole from, I think, Ken Connors, who's a lawyer, because everything that's smart and intuitive, I steal from other lawyers.
Me too.
And Ken said one of the questions, especially in the nursing home world, where people are dying just ugly deaths. And the defense is going to be, well, they're 89. They really didn't know where they were. In essence, they were going to die anyway. And so I tried to question, do you think it matters how you die in voir dire? And that would always get the people talking. And that was always one of the 3 open-ended questions I submitted. And then I would simply take the words that they use in voir dire and in my closing would just take the evidence and say, it does matter how you die. And I would just use the words they said in voir dire right in my closing argument.
That's exactly right. In the dram shop case, right? So the way we got to the bars can prevent is we said, how as a society do we prevent drunk driving? Parents, schools, whatever. And so people said, well, like MAD. And I said, what's MAD? Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Everybody remember that? Yeah. So that was the thing in school. How about as parents? And so this one woman said, well, I always tell my kids, I don't want you drinking at all. But if you're going to drink, don't drive. I'll come pick you up. I'd rather you be drunk and alive than dead. Right. And so we said that in our opening, as a society, we want to make sure we do not have drunk drivers on the road. In fact, as parents, and he looked right at that juror.
Right.
We tell our kids, I'll come get you. And she started crying because it was her stuff reflected back to her. It's so important. I do have one quibble with what you said, though. You said that, does it matter how you die is not an open question because that's a yes or no answer. So somewhere along the line, y'all did the do or the does questions.
Yeah.
It's always, do you think this?
Well, because we didn't have much of a choice in New Jersey, but the way it was originally asked before I jerseyed it was some folks believe it matters how you die, with dignity. Others say everyone's going to die anyway. It doesn't. Which way do you lean? They made it as a which way do you lean question.
I love that. And we always use what or how.
Yeah.
How important is it? Yeah. Or what's important about, right? And so then it assumes the juror has an answer. How important is this? And they go, very important. And I'll say, say more, right? Or what's important about the way we die? Even more open-ended. So how or what is my tip for listeners?
I'm gonna my last question, serious question, is okay. So your I forgot it. How do you like that? This is what happens when you turn 60.
Try having chemo brain too. I'm 50 and I can't remember.
Yeah,
anything.
It just went out of my head, but it actually just went out of my head. So we're going through the trial, and one of the things that we always are panicked over, and we'll leave it with this, is how much money do we ask for? It's something that's a fear that we all have because A, am I asking for too little? B, if I ask for too much, do I destroy all credibility? How do you feel about getting to that answer?
You asked, it's not possible to ask for too much if you own it. The only way you destroy your credibility is if you ask for something more than you think it's worth. So that's why it's always comes down to what you can own and believe. One person believes a case is worth $50,000. Another person thinks it's worth $50 million. Neither one of them is wrong. It's what can you own? So for me, I always say when people say, what's the right number? I never answer that question. I say, pick a number that is something that you can own, but that's a little bit of a stretch. It just makes you a little bit scared, right? So you're like, okay, I think I could totally easily own 10. And so great, ask for 15 or 12, okay. Something that's just like, just makes you a little bit scared because that's going to have the excitement factor of it. But again, look at John Bailey's case, $120 million. Most lawyers would be like, I could never even consider asking for that. But he was like, that was the right number in my bones. And he got it. So that's really awesome. Is something that you own.
Wow. That's because in focus groups, but then again, in focus groups, you're not presenting the entire case. You're not giving any person even an inkling as to why they should ever.
The energy's not there.
No,
right. I mean, I always say your best focus group is the actual jury in front of you on the day of voir dire, right? Focus groups to me, and you are the expert, but this is what I always say. Focus groups are to show you the holes in your case, the things you need to plug, the things you haven't thought about, but they're never going to give you a totally accurate picture of what a juror is really going to think in the moment. That's what you get in jury selection. That's why voir dire is so
Right.
important, right? But you won't be able to get there without focus groups in many cases. You need all that information to really cool down, and get to where you really can then play with your actual jury in front of you.
So, of course, I remembered the question that I definitely wanted to go over with you, and it's the bane of everybody's existence, right? I don't believe in the Republican versus Democrats anymore. I don't think that's even meaningful. I think we've got liberals, conservatives, we've got progressives, and then this MAGA ultra conservative. My experience with the MAGA jurors is nobody wants them for any reason, because they're just for so many reasons. And I don't want to debate those, but how do you go about figuring out who is a MAGA juror?
I don't.
So you don't want to know, like, there's no buzzwords you're listening for to say, I really can't have that person on my jury.
I don't care about demographics at all. I don't care if you're a conservative, a liberal, a MAGA, a man, a woman. I don't care about your age. I don't care about that you're a manager at work. I don't care about any of that. I think all of that is a fucking waste of time. We may disagree about that.
No, I love listening to you.
So here's why. Again, if you know all that information, let's say I give you the buzzwords and you go in, you come back and you go, okay, we found out that this person's MAGA and a manager and male, and they read the Wall Street Journal. And then you look at me and you go, I don't know. We're just guessing. Did you ask them the questions that we designed? Well, only thing that I care about is what comes out of their mouth after the question. Because a MAGA juror, a Republican juror, conservative, all the things that we think are negative in this world, they're rule followers. They are freedom people, right?
Absolutely are.
So we have to find the worldview that matches with our jury. And most of those things, as far as we want to talk about how polarized people are today, most of those things we all believe in. That's what a principle is. That's why H2H is based on principles. It's something 99.9% of people believe in. So I don't have to worry about the rest of that shit if I'm asking really good questions and then listening to the answers. That will tell me everything I need to know. All the other stuff is just guesswork.
Yeah, my best verdicts have come from conservative jurors, where we're saying all they had to do was follow the rule and accept accountability and responsibility for not following it.
Yep.
I agree with
that. Which are huge themes in conservative circles.
The MAGA stuff is what scares the you know what out of me.
And we'll find out who they are, won't we? With our questions.
Well, yeah, in theory, we will from their questions. So
we got to just trust that we think that going into the jury selection process is different than talking to anybody else. I can sit at coffee with somebody and know if they're MAGA. You got to treat it the same way in jury selection. Just be with people. People go, I don't know what they're going to say. You don't know what they're going to say. Do you not live in the world? Do you not, like, who do you go to work with and buy coffee from? We live with people. They are people in a weird situation. Yes, but just be with people and everything you need to know is going to float to the surface.
All right. Well, thank you, Sari. I've certainly taken enough of your time. Sari Delamotte, I want every person who's listening to this to go on their computer, type in sariswears.com, SARI swears, SWEARS.com, and
/jury. I have a special training for them.
Wow. /jury.
Yeah.
Sign up, listen to her podcast. It's free. It's funny. And it will help you look at things differently. It will take some of the fear out of what we do. And it will give you some sort of structure, which I think is what lawyers who aren't trying cases and aren't getting good verdicts are missing, is structure. The structure may be different between Sari and Keenan and David Ball, but it still works. It's still structure. And to me, that is so important. Sari, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you, my friend.
Hopefully we'll have you on. You know what I'll do? I'll set something up where we'll have you, Megan, Jay, and all your clients, and we can talk about all the ways you've got them a lot of money.
Fun. Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you again, and I will talk to you soon. On for another 2 hours, just talking about the way Sari thinks. The stuff she just told you about for voir dire was simply gold. And you can imagine if she's telling us that on this podcast, imagine what you're going to learn if you listen to her podcast. And if you buy her book, From Hostage to Hero, which you can get on Trial Guides. Sari wanted me to let you know that if you go to sariswears.com/jury, there's even more information with regard to voir dire and different things you can either talk to her for free or purchase. It's what we do for a living. We try cases. She is giving you ways that just make sense. They're not that different from what else is out there, whether it be Reptile, whether it be Rules of the Road, whether it be David Ball. It's just another way of looking at it with another approach. And I think there's something to be said about Sari's way, because it just resonates and it just makes sense, as you heard. So thank you for joining us. This is The Jury Thinks What, a podcast by trial lawyers for trial lawyers on the Lawyer Minds ecosystem, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
That concludes another episode of the Jury Thinks What podcast, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. Thank you for listening, and we truly hope it was worth your time. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content that Lawyer Minds has to offer, and engage with us on social media. Your feedback and ideas are always welcomed. See you next time.